Hello, family. My name is James Trice, and I'm the creator of a podcast called YANA, or You Are Not Alone. You Are Not Alone is a podcast for Black men. It is more than just a podcast. It's a lifeline and a brotherhood. We're here to create a supportive, judgment-free space where Black men can have real, open conversations about what truly matters to us, from family and relationships to community, sports, culture, politics, faith, sex, race, education, and the challenges of everyday life. We dive deep into it all. Whether you're looking for advice, motivation, prayer, or just the comfort of knowing you're not walking this journey alone. Yana is here for you. This is your space to connect, grow, and be heard, because none of us are meant to do life alone. Look for new episodes weekly wherever you get your podcasts. And look for me on Instagram at jbtrice123. Welcome to Yana. Grace and peace, everyone. Welcome again to another edition of Yana, You Are Not Alone. Again, a space for Black men to come together and to talk, to be heard, to express ourselves concerning the issues that matter most to us. Today is a part two of a series with my brother Mujasi Bandele, and we're going to continue the conversation that we had in our last episode of Yana, and from there, because I felt that it was something that we need to take time to really delve into and talk about. It's kind of like just eating an apple, one bite at a time, and I want us to do this because I think this is something that is significant for us as Black people to talk about. So this again is part two of a several part conversation, I think, with my brother and concerning the Black family, the Black man, being a whole Black man, being restored as a Black man, to be a full Black man, a functioning Black man in our society. And then as a Black man is, then the family also is a part of that, right? Growing the family, and we both need each other. The Black man needs the family, and the family needs the Black man, as well as the Black woman. So this is not to minimize the role of Black women, but this podcast really focuses on Black men. And so, Brother Mujasi, thank you again. Thank you for coming back, man. I appreciate you so much. You good?
It's an honor. Yeah, it's an honor to be here. Thank you again, brother, for having me on.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming back. And so I want to continue where we left off, right? Last time we talked, our last conversation we had where we left off, I asked you a question at the end. It was kind of a question that came to me as we were in the middle of our conversation. What do you envision the future for Black men? And I asked that question to you, particularly with regard to what we were talking about at that time. And your response was really interesting. You said that you are concerned, and you're concerned for a couple of reasons. One is that you're concerned that we're not able to institutionalize what it means to be a Black man, to be a man, and to be an African-centered man, African-descended man, I'm sorry, in this society. The other piece that you're concerned about is that we were not able to transmit this through generations beyond us, right? And that you're concerned that we're leaving it up to young Black men, young boys, to figure it out for themselves through trial and error. I think that is in part your response. Am I correct? Was that what you were
Yes,
saying? Did you want to
absolutely,
elaborate on?
absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
it's and thank you for highlighting that. As once again, it's an honor to be here. My concern is that, in simplest words, we're not creating and maintaining the processes to help young boys become men.
Wow.
And we're living in a society that not only is anti-Black and anti-African, but they're anti-Black and anti-African man. And the script and the template of what it means to be a man is not owned nor created and designed by us. And so my
Mm.
concern is that because we're trying to genuflect to a definition of manhood that isn't rooted into our experience, we don't know how to create a consistent process of a birthing of a young male and raising them up culturally with practices and intentional engagement and inputs for that young male to become a man and to define and act accordingly to a cultural institutional definition of manhood. And that's my concern. That's a deep concern of mine with a lot of the factors that we're dealing with. And
So how do we how does that look in real time?
Mhm.
Practically, how does that look? So how does that look? And then how do we institutionalize it? Particularly, what you said is that we live in a society that is really anti-black, anti-black male, anti-black man, and where we as black men, and I say this often that someone else said, but this is true, I think, where they see us as America's villains.
Mhm. Mhm.
What does that look like, and how do we institutionalize it? Because the larger question is, how do
Right.
we institutionalize it? And what does
Right.
institutionalizing mean, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so it looks like us owning that process. It looks like us designing it and creating all of the processes that goes into socializing males into men. And so what does that look like? One of the first thing that we learned in the science of family science is that the first institution that we're born into is the family. And so, to answer your question directly, the family is the first institutionalized process of building manhood. But it starts prenatally. you know, if you want to
Mm,
get into the neurological development of of the brain and the infant and stuff like that, it starts prenatally. And then there's an infancy process to that. And from the time moment the child is born, there are stages that the child's develop in at the institute of the family, the practice and the process of family making and being contributes to defining and contributing to that cultural development. And so it's one of those pieces where um, the family functions as the first primary role of where the young male get introduced into the scripts, the templates, the practices, and the routines of what it means to be cultivated into a man. And we know what our family situation is dealing with right now. Now,
mm,
I'm speaking with the first institution. Of course,
mm,
there's institutions beyond that. We got to look at the child's
mm,
education engagement, their extracurriculum activities, intentional community
mm,
spaces where
mm,
they're around other black men and
mm,
their other men are mentoring them and coaching them, and the fathers are working in
mm,
tandem with other men to provide programs that gives the young male experiences that teaches them and engages them
mm,
on the man, and that's beyond the
mm,
family. But to answer
mm,
your question directly, that first institution and process is us and our family functioning, being able to wrap up a healthy functioning father, healthy functioning mother, and grandparents into that process, aunties and uncles in the process of the young males in the family learning the definition and the practices. It's not only just the definition, but the practices of developing themselves in healthy ways to practice and be engaged in the development. Starts in the family.
So are you? It sounds like you're saying uh, the man or a man, you get a particular man, what he looks like, how he engages, his ways of being, is predicated on the family that he was raised in,
Yes.
right? And so if that is
Yes.
true, then where does the family get it from? So again, where does it start? It's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
what comes first, the chicken or the
Or the
egg in a
chicken or the
sense, right?
egg. That's right.
Right?
The family is an integral part, and this is an Amos Wilson piece. The family is an integral part of the community. So the family creates a culture. In family science, we say families create cultures. But the family culture is a small microcosm of the community culture, the culture that, the people, the nation, the peoplehood that we come from. So if we're African descendants, I'm going to use the term that I like to use. If we're African descendants in America, we want to say we're African American, want to use the racial categorization of Black. But if we're African American, the culture and the ways of being African American has to have some type of general script of what we believe culturally a man is. And again, that's a debatable, controversial piece that we'll go down that hopefully in the future. But whatever that definitions of man is, it has to be something we see within the body politic and the activity of being African American. And then now those scripts, those ideas, those cultural ethos of what it means to be a man becomes something that the family absorbs and emulates that. Whatever those mores are, whatever those ethics are, whatever those practices are, those roles and assignments of those roles are, the family says we embrace that and we're going to socialize the young male towards that general definition of African American manhood. So you can't separate the family from the body politic of the entire culture of the peoplehood. You can't. They are the macro expression of what the cultural says this is who we are as a people. And this is what we necessitate. So the family just becomes the output institution to begin the process of the young males experiencing and walking towards their manhood maturation.
So the family is the man is a product of that family.
Yes.
Product of their particular way of being to create this healthy black man, to be a man, to be a black man, to be an Afrocentric man.
Yeah.
Then if everybody doesn't adopt that, then what happens? What do we have then? So I
Yeah.
don't know if I'm
And
asking
it's
a few questions, but it's
it's multi-layered with complex questions, but the essential fundamental question is where we started from. And this is where my concern come in at. Because the process of being able to define that hasn't been fully accepted and embraced by the larger body of our people. Like you said, and I'm gonna give a more concrete example. If we was to talk to my brothers in the Nation of Islam, they have a very specific script of what it means to be a man. I
mm-hmm,
grew up in a Southern Baptist church. And so, if you talk to my uncles and them about what it means to be a man from a Southern Baptist tradition, that has a certain definition of manhood. You got brothers. I got uncles and cousins who are part of the Prince Hall Masonic Lodge. They
mm-hmm.
have, which is similar in other respects, but they have a definition of manhood that has a certain characteristic. So when we kind of investigate different segments of our peoplehood, which even that identity and peoplehood is a conversation in itself, you get all of these multi-layered definitions of what it means to be a man. And this is what makes this complex because we're in this process of trying to, and it's a necessity right now. We're in this process of trying to just define how do we institutionalize this? How do we make something that's more uniform, not completely uniform, but more uniformed, where we can say at least the ethos and the themes of what it means to be a black man covers this, this, and this. Now, it may manifest slightly different if you grew up in the Nation of Islam. It may manifest slightly different if you grew up Orthodox Islam. It may manifest slightly different if you're Episcopalian or if you're a Methodist or maybe you grew up Presbyterian. As a black Christian, it may manifest differently. It may manifest different regionally. It may show up slightly different with our brothers who grew up in Georgia, Florida, or Alabama versus us who grew up here in the Minnesota, Twin Cities, Chicago, or Gary, Indiana. It shows up a little different. But
Hmm.
in the general sense, we need some type of ethos, some type of theme that connects a broader definition of manhood so that way we can use that as a template to build males up into this because what we need and what's necessity, what Amos Wilson teaches us is that by economic and survival of our group, we need a common theme of how we create men out of our nation that can rise up to meet the needs and the necessity for our survival as a people. So anywhere it goes, we have to figure this out. We have to come up with something to help socialize. And it's a general template. It's again, it could look a little differently depending on where we're at and what part of group we're in.
Right.
But we need something that commonly connects us because my son graduates out of and becomes mature into out of
Hmm.
Minnesota, there has to be something thematically that connects him to young black men in Texas. And the same thing, there has to be something that connects them to that young brother that's growing up in Southern California. So that way, if they meet up at a conference somewhere and they're talking about business and economic development for themselves and our people, they have some common characteristics that connect them that allows them to have common conversation and communal connection where they could say, man, I grew up in this way, but I understand that principle of relative. I understand that principle of resistance. I understand that principle of relational
Hmm.
connection. I understand that reflective principle. I get that. And so then they're easily to be able to exchange in resources and conversation and build together as men. But we have to figure that out. We have to figure that out. And when I say this country for white male patriarchy, they have processes in place already to help white men to figure out what their dominancy in their manhood looks like, to look like what their code of white manhood look like. Do they always agree and get up? No, that's just who Europeans are. But they have a process that
Right.
makes them believe like Constitution is part of my manhood. Bearing arms is part of my manhood.
Mm.
Leading the household for me is part of my manhood. Um, Controlling land and controlling my resources is part of my manhood. Like these things, as themes, are encoded in how they socialize their children to have kind of like domain over their environment and space. African men in America need that process. And some of us, for the last 30 years, have been trying to
Hmm.
develop that conversation from Naeem Akbar to all the way to my recent brother who I just spoke to, Imhotep Fayutu out of Baltimore. They all have these codes of what it means to be African men, the 21st century African men. But we have to figure out a way to universalize it in terms of the themes and then create institutions around that so that it becomes household language and processes for our families. Let me stop there so we can
Yeah,
say that.
that's interesting. I mean, what you're saying is intriguing. So the question then is, what is it? What are those themes? What are those ingredients? Right? What are those
Mm-hmm.
things you said we have to have something that is that is common,
Mm-hmm.
that how we define what a black man is. What are those? What are those
What are
common
those?
themes?
Yeah. So I'm going to speak from the work that I do that I've been
Yes.
able to draw from some of the pieces. And then, the language will look differently depending on who you're reading from. I consider these pieces a reflective process of what it developing young boys into manhood, a relational process that develop young boys into manhood, and a resistance process that develop young males into manhood. And regardless of where you're at in history, whether we're talking back in Henry McNeill Turner or Frederick Douglass days, all the way to me and you having this discourse right now, there's always a piece where we have to be reflective in who we are. And that's the domain of our spiritual connection. That's the domain of our emotional connection, because we always are not allowed to have emotions. That's the domain of how we understand conceptually and perceive who we are. That piece is a composite of us developing a healthy esteem of how we perceive ourselves in the world. Then there's the relational process. And the relational process is, who am I in relation to the people that I love, who I'm
Mm-hmm.
responsible for, and who I'm
Mm-hmm.
accountable for? And
Mm-hmm.
every author that I've read and studied on this piece tends to start manhood with kind of that component. Manhood is
Mm-hmm.
the protector and the provider. You understand your manhood based
Mm-hmm.
on what you're doing for others. And
Mm-hmm.
we can't excommunicate it. That's a real thing. We only understand our manhood in relation to how we're responsible for the community and the people within our community. So there's a relational process of, am I a good husband? Am I a good son? Am I a good father? Am I a good mentor? Am I a good mentee? What are the roles in my relationship to other people that I'm acting in practice and performing manhood? And then the last piece that is critically important for our that, and however we design this in the language, is the resistance components. And this is the
Mm-hmm.
piece that, this is a little slightly controversial, but when I read behind David Gilmour, white anthropologist who studied manhood across the globe, all the way down to how it shows up in Aki Madabuti's book, the pieces on African descendancies in the Americas, particularly even here, but if we want to focus on Black manhood, is that our existence was not designed. It wasn't expected. It wasn't a part of the original script of being American. We were supposed to be the perfect labor force. And so that laboring force does not allow the equation of the agency of manhood. You have to be subjected to the debasement of what it means. You have to be the most primordial man or human being that can basically have all his needs and emotionals and intellectuals needs met by outside forces. You just had to be physically capable enough to lift that, to pick that cotton, lift that bale of hay, take care of the horses, till the land, and that's it. You wasn't. It wasn't designed for you to be thinking and feeling in this country. Okay, and so the resistance piece is us saying, I am going to push back against the original and current scripts of America by defining my manhood for me. And I know by nature of me saying I am a man, like they did in 1967 in Memphis, Tennessee, I am a
Yeah.
man. That script says I am pushing up against the dominant ideology that I am a subservient, menial laborer and worker, and I have no dimensions of my own manhood and capability of taking care of my own community. It pushes up against that, and we have no choice. I'm sorry. It just there's people would try to reconcile this, but my manhood is going to push up against the definition of what America has for me, for my man. So the reflective process, that's our spiritual, mental, and emotional development of ourselves. Our relational process, that's us examining who we are in relation and in responsibility to others in our community. And the resistance process, that's us pushing up against the dominant script of who they prescribed us to be and declaring um, my own manhood for myself, which automatically, like Jawanza Kujufo and Akbar says, it puts me in declaration of war with America.
How do we institutionalize this? The
Yes, yes.
reflective, the
Mm-hmm.
relational, and the resistance piece, and all of those have to work in conjunction with each other. One cannot work,
Yes,
as I hear you, one cannot work outside the other, but
yes,
each one
yes.
of them responds to the society in particular ways. Um, how do we institutionalize that, man? I mean, because we have a situation going on with this present administration, this government
Mm-hmm.
that seems to, and have never, I don't think, let me just say this, have never stopped fighting the Civil War.
Mm.
Society continues to reinforce what Justice Roger Taney said in the 1857 Dred Scott
Praise God
decision
this
that
thing.
says
Yes,
that
sir.
blacks have no rights that whites are bound to respect. He also,
Hmm.
before that, said that we're not human. We're an inferior being, a spirit, inferior species, and therefore unhuman, and so therefore can't be citizens because we're not humans and we're property.
Hmm.
Therefore, blacks have no rights that are bound to respect. And that has not been repudiated,
Mm-mm.
right? I think the
Mm-mm.
13 to 14 Amendment, I think, attempted to repudiate it, but there always was a caveat to
Oh,
it,
yes.
right?
Yep.
So then, based on that, I want us to talk a little bit more about the resistance piece, given the present political climate that we're in right now,
Mm. Mm.
right?
Mm. See, there's different levels we can talking about resistance piece, and the resistance piece is going to be how we enact our own manhood and take care of our community, respond to this nation within our
Hmm.
communities, our own personal lives, and how do we find processes to be prepared when this nation turns back on us again and directly publicly assaults the African in America. But there's another question you asked just a little bit ago that was
Hmm.
opening up, like, how do we do this? Like, how do
Yes,
we look
let's go
at
back
these
there.
different layers? Yeah.
Yes.
And again, this goes back and centralize the family. And it is, and of course, I'm a family scientist, so I'm going to speak from this lens of how we do family.
Please,
But
please do so.
family is also, my part of my work is, psychology and sociology. And the piece that I love about my work is that I get to talk a little bit about history. But the family is a critical important piece. And if you notice the ways in which we are losing this complex adjustment and competition to be able to define who we are and be healthy is through that family making process. Families, I mean, we can look at our median income to our house, our home ownership, to our people's economic situation. We can look at the state of fathers' roles and involvement as custodial residents in the family's homes. We can look at the dynamics of relationship pieces between mothers and their children. We can look at a bunch of different metrics to see the state and health of the Black family. And you already see right there, in so many levels, we're losing this battle. We're losing this war because we can't seem to create cohesive, stable families that lived within the functioning, economically and politically and social functioning to be able to produce healthy children. And so the institutional process has been able to create a home environment with a mother and a father who's directly involved that has some sense of their own well-being to pour into that child to make sure that from prenatal to birth and every sequential stage after that, that child needs has been met. They have a trusting adult in their life. They have a mother and a father that's intentional, whether they together or not. They have an intentional co-parenting dynamic to raise that child together in some type of a congruency. To be, when I said intentional, intentional with being able to supply education, nutrition, a cultural sense of development, routines and practices, and a healthy discipline process that takes into consideration the development of the child. We're talking about a whole human being that's developing here. We part of this process is Black men being able to fight grit enough to develop their manhood just enough to be able to say, I there's this young male that I'm cultivating. I need him to be able to feel what he's feeling in his emotional and physical space and name it. We have to help young males to get beyond just laughter and
Hmm.
hunger and anger as their primary emotions that they only feel. But how do you learn to feel complex feelings of confusion, grief, sadness, and ambiguity, all of these other feelings that you can name it and then have the tools on the inside to be able to process it without resulting in smoking weed, without resulting in drinking, without resulting in sex or overeating. But how do we actually feel these things as an integrated human being and process it? That's the emotional space. Then there's the mental space. How do, as a mother and a father, I can be able to instill these jewels of wisdoms about how you ethically conduct yourself? How do you understand the world? How do you how do you make sure that that child at 4 or 5 years of age can look at the melanization that they have, they can look at the history of their people and be able to have dignity in that, have pride in that, to hear these narrations of their own family, let alone their family in connection to their peoplehood, and say, this is about me and I'm important. And I mean, because my people, it tells me I'm valuable and I'm needed and I'm a part of a bigger story. And that story is heroic, it's heroic. If that story is triumphant, that story entails people who brought down an institution of slavery, and we was able to build societies and families and community processes. We build economic engines because of the strength of my people, because of the ethos. How do I help this child to see that what the African did with the church in America transformed America to be able to understand what true democracy looks like and produce some of the most powerful leaders? I'm sorry, I get passionate about this stuff, but
No, keep going. Yes.
this is the intellectual piece, this is the mental piece, and then being able to help that child from early childhood to middle childhood to early adolescence to be able to say, I am anchored in myself because I have this relationship with this essence that I call God, that I can commune and talk to every day for a source of strength. That my source of strength is not only empowered by my relationship with my people, but it comes from this divine purpose that has scripted me for eons. And I'm a part of this whole plan and this whole piece that makes me important and powerful to how I contribute to this world. See, when a child grows up, and they're getting a family routine and rituals every single day, every single week, every month, every year, and reminded about how important they are, how loved they are, how
Mm.
valuable they are, and that the process that they're experiencing at this moment is something that we're going to accept and we're going to teach you and walk you through it. And that way you become it critically understanding of how important you are to your family and to the people that look like you in this nation, then you're going to end up producing a young male that by the time he's graduating and being able to launch from home, he knows his vision, he knows his script. He has a grounded understanding of how to take care of himself. He knows what self-care and self-build looks like as a man. He knows who his resources is in his community. He can draw strength and source from not only his peoplehood, but his relationship to God. And he knows that he is critically important to the necessity of his people's survival. He knows that he is responsible for the care and support of his sisters and his brothers and his mother and his father. He knows that he has to be instrumental to bring it into next generation while he's also receiving support and wisdom from the previous generation. He knows how to have an intergenerational honor and respect between not only his young people that he's supporting, but the elders and the wisdom of the people that he's standing on top of. And that piece is possible for us. We have to stop thinking this is fanatical, that the family is the place to do that. That the father has to be instrumental with making sure he's connecting with his brothers, his father, and drawing the resources and everyday routines and rituals where that young male get to experience healthy males around them. And that's difficult for us because, of course, we're dealing with these vertical factors in our life where we have addiction, we're struggling with poverty, struggling with racism, we're struggling with structures of white supremacy, bias and distorted microaggressions that come from whiteness in the educational system. We're dealing with a lot that impedes upon that, but that's the struggle. And it goes back to your second question. That's the resistance points. We even have to understand that just the process of raising a young male to be healthy, mature, to have emotional connecting, to be spiritually endowed, to know his value in this world is resistance. That's a revolutionary piece. It goes as far before we pick up the gun and teach them about Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. It has everything to do with, is that child capable of teaching? And this is, teaching is discipline. We could call it self discipline or self teaching. It's the same thing. Is that child capable of self teaching himself at a certain point where he can be able to walk in this world, master his environment, have the love and compassion to be able to support and love his people, take care of himself, and have a vision and focus to be able to serve his people?
Hmm.
That's the resistance piece. That it takes, and one man can't do that. Grandfather has to be involved. Uncles have to be involved. James Trice have to be involved with Kanandi and Andwele so they know that Papa ain't just talking this by myself, that he got this from his big brother James Trice. And James Trice has
Right.
been teaching these things in these micro pieces of connections for years. And that they're a part of a process of Black manhood thinking and practices that has been able to help me become self-sufficient. They know you, but they need to know that I've sat down on numerous occasions learning from you on how to construct my entrepreneurial direction so that way not only I can serve my people, but I can economically sustain me and my wife. And so, as they pick up these entrepreneurial pieces to be able to define how they do this, they need to know they're standing and walking in the legacy of a James Trice who's helped their Bapa be able to understand these pieces. That's how this works. This is resistance. This is how it looks because they have to grow into their manhood, but their manhood requires me, Travis, James Trice, Thomas. It requires Shaquille and all of these other men that's pouring into them in so many different ways in a routine and ritualistic way. So that way they're constantly experiencing these templates and definitions of manhood to where it becomes a part of who they are.
Wow. Thank you. That is, I think we're going to end with that
Okay.
because I think that's just, I think I want to leave the audience with that. And I want to give you
Yeah.
something to think about as we go into the third episode in this important discussion. Is you talked a lot about what the black family looks like, a healthy black
Hmm.
family looks like, and and from that, a healthy black man can come out of that, right? That's how
Hmm.
a healthy black man is built in that family relationship or in that family dynamic that knows, um, how to just be. The
Hmm.
question is, I think, and you don't have to answer this, but give it some thought for our next, and I want to just throw it out for people so
Hmm.
they can come back. Is how do we decolonize what it looks like to be a black family? Because much of what we have learned being here in the United States is is based in Eurocentric realities, right? We've been taught to center whiteness in everything we do, from our
Hmm.
relationships and everything we do. We've been taught how does how do we as black people decolonize what it looks like to be a black family,
Hmm.
right? How do we do that? How do we um, all of the characteristics that you mentioned? How do we decolonize that? So then it's not Eurocentric, but it's Afrocentric. That's something to think
Yeah.
about for our next one.
That is. And I think, in chapter 4 of his book, Haki Matabuti, in Black Men Dangerous and Obsolete, he talks about these different cultural ways of how we centralize what it means to be a black, to shift and discard away from the Eurocentric piece, but he then also questioned, is that necessity? Is that of necessity? How much do we understand the Eurocentric value of manhood, and what are the key characteristics that make it distinctively different from?
Mm,
And I think let's explore that and talk about that because when we when we unpack some of that, we'll be able to see that much of what we do already thematically centered around the traditional value of manhood that we've fully never went subconscious, and that it forces us, who we are, forces us automatically to respond in this way of man to more related to our ancestors than it is Eurocentric. But there's characteristics of how we understand manhood that's a part of. And
yeah.
this thing could go deep, Brother James.
Yeah.
Like there's a piece of this that I'm a little censored where I'm gonna say, like, because of
Yes.
me and your
Mm.
Christian, background, I have to say, like, I don't want to have that on the podcast, because it
No,
could
I
get a
want you
little.
to say it. This is what this is all about. I just want you to be
Hmm.
real, be free to share what you want to share, and don't let what you think about my or what you believe about my relationship with my Lord and
And
Savior
mine
Jesus
too. And
Christ,
mine too.
right?
Yep. Yeah.
To
Mhm.
prevent you from saying it because we need to know, right?
Yeah.
I want to hear, right? And don't be afraid of offending me in any way, shape, or form.
Absolutely. And but I want to make sure it always remain instructive and instrumental.
Yep.
The
Yes.
conversation, because I'm excited to talk about that because that decolonization process is required and necessity, but it's a lot more closer than we think we are.
Okay. All right, brother.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, everyone, for tuning into this second edition of a long conversation that we're going to be having with Brother Mujasi Bandele. And I want to thank you so much. Come back on our next edition to this conversation. And thank you for tuning in to this episode of YANA. YANA Extra is what I'm going to call this. So, peace and blessings, everyone. And remember, we're never meant to do life alone. Thank you, brother Mujasi, and look forward to our third conversation. All right, brother. Blessings.
Blessings.
Yana is here for you. This is your space to connect, grow, and be heard because none of us are meant to do life alone.